If you're a NativeScript developer and you've been living under a rock, then you might not know who Brad Martin is. But if you haven't been living under a rock, then Brad Martin sounds like a familiar name to you. And that's because Brad has authored NativeScript courses on egghead.io. He's also written a number of articles on his own blog, and he's one of the most prolific creators of NativeScript plugins out there. If you follow Brad on Twitter, you will see him occasionally posting pictures of himself working out, and that's probably because he's a well-rounded developer that codes and manages to keep himself in good shape. Let's find out more about Brad and see what kind of tips he has for y'all. Here's my chat with Brad. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Alex, and today I've got somebody you might be all familiar with. His name is Brad Martin. Brad is a course author. He's authored video courses. He's authored lots of blog articles, and he's also one of the founding members of NStudio. NStudio you've heard about many times on this channel before. They're a premier shop for NativeScript development. And he probably has more plugins than anybody else I know. Maybe Eddie has more. I don't know yet. Brad can fill in the gaps here. And also, Brad happens to be the strongest developer I know, literally. So maybe we can chat about that too. Brad, anything else I missed?
That's it, man. That's it. NStudio, I work for Permobil Inc., which is based in Sweden. And then NStudio, I'm still part of that. So that's it.
So you have lots of work to do, lots of jobs, and it's all NativeScript development, right?
90% NativeScript, yep.
Now, your background is in .NET from what I remember last time we talked, right?
Yeah, I started out with .NET, C#, VB, took a class on VB in college, and that's how I got into doing software. Had no JavaScript knowledge for many years. I did just C# for the first 2 years of my career once I landed my first job. That was fun, painful at times. It was supporting a legacy .NET 4, I think it was .NET 4 at the time, web app, ASP, web forms, everything. So that was fun. Then I started to get into JavaScript and went from there. And then, of course, at that job, we got into mobile, and that's what kind of led into NativeScript.
Yeah, so TypeScript comes in pretty natural to you, being that you're from C# background.
Yeah, it was surprising to me, actually, because when I first started NativeScript, I was using JavaScript, and I had looked at TypeScript, but it was still kind of confusing. Of course, it's very similar to C#, but it was still kind of confusing because I didn't understand all the semantics of the language and actually using the types and the aliases and so forth. So I was hesitant to jump into TypeScript, but once I started on plugins, I made the leap, and then I've never looked back. Been using TypeScript for, I guess, 3 years now.
Yeah, I love TypeScript. I mean, it just adds a whole new level of productivity to my stuff. Now, do you work with mostly core apps, NativeScript Core, or NativeScript Angular apps?
Right now, 2 of both at my day job at Permobil that we use. The mobile apps, we use Angular, but then we have 2 core apps that run on Wear OS, and so we decided to not use Angular just to keep everything lighter. As far as the installs on the APKs for the watches, they just have less storage, less memory, and less everything. So we just had to keep it as light as possible.
So that's interesting. You're actually creating NativeScript apps, and you're using NativeScript runtimes for Wear OS, and that's not an Android device, or it is an Android device, is it?
Yeah, Wear OS is Android. So that's why you can actually run. You can use the CLI, TNS Create, whatever, make your mobile app, and then connect a Wear OS emulator or watch to your computer. Mm-hmm. Do the run command, and it'll actually install it because it's just the APK. Of course, it's not going to look great because it's going to be, oddly styled for mobile to the watch, depending if you have a circle or the square watch face. Mm-hmm. So there are some differences there, but that's where we actually made a plugin to simplify a lot of the UI for Wear OS with NativeScript.
That's an Android device, so it makes sense that it just works right out of the box. But you probably have to design it a little bit differently and think of the design ahead of time for a small display.
Exactly. Yeah, there's that. And then there's a few different layouts that are specifically for Wear OS that Android makes. And so we wrapped those into a plugin just to simplify our lives and then anyone else's. We published that. So
how many plugins did you write?
In total, Man, I really don't know. It might be 20. It's over 20. I think Eddie actually might have more. Or OC Fortune, Trini Wiz. He might have more actually than both of us, I think. It's one of us who has more. I moved a bunch of mine over to InStudio's GitHub, so I just kind of ditched them. That way other people could contribute from the team and not need me to always be the manager of the repo. So I've tried to lessen the burden on myself for all the OSS work that I have.
Yeah. Out of all those plugins you wrote, do you have a favorite?
The Wear OS one that we did at Permobil is actually probably one of my favorites. We bundled a bunch of different packages into this one, so it actually is more than just a specific one thing plugin. There's layouts, there's components and everything that we bundled into one plugin. So I would say that's probably my favorite one. And
just because of the challenge that you faced and you solved the problem.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a lot of challenges to it, and there's still some work that can be done to improve it. But overall, it's a pretty nice little plugin that we worked on.
Other than plugins, what's your favorite NativeScript tool to work with? Like a service or a tool that comes with this ecosystem?
Convey, the backend from Progress. We actually use it, and I actually enjoy using it for our backend. If that's kind of what you're hinting at.
Cool. So that's a competitor of like AWS or Azure, and they have their own backend services, but it integrates pretty well with NativeScript.
Yeah, it's kind of like AWS, Azure, Firebase, as far as cloud storage and everything like that. So real time syncing back and forth works pretty well. And like you said, it's supported for NativeScript, so it made sense for us to use it. And then they've got the SDKs for NativeScript that work really well. And they also have a REST API. So if you don't want to actually use the SDK to bloat your app for whatever reason on the JavaScript side, you can actually just make REST calls to the API and do what you need to do.
Yeah, they built NativeScript, so it makes sense that they have a good integration and good SDK for that. When you're developing your NativeScript applications, are you using the emulator or using hardware to test on as you're developing?
Mobile apps, I usually go for the emulator, like probably, 75% of the time. I have an Android phone. I have a Pixel. So it's easy for me just to plug in and keep my phone charged all day, and I just use it to run the apps on. So it's probably 75-25 for me as far as that goes. Now, the Wear OS, I do prefer to use the actual hardware. So I have a couple watches. The emulators are fine, but there's limitations with the emulators that don't carry over to the devices, such as Bluetooth is one, and some network stuff. And that's kind of a requirement for the apps is using Bluetooth. So a lot of the times I just have to use the actual hardware versus emulators.
Yeah, I have a couple of hardware pieces that I run, but I like to run on the simulator most of the time. And only once in a while I'll check on a hardware device just to be certain that it's actually working. But when you're learning new technology, and we're all constantly learning new stuff, what do you like to use? Do you like to read articles, or do you like to watch videos, YouTube, courses? How do you like to consume new content?
For me, it's usually reading blog posts, articles, whatever, documentation, and then actually doing the work. I don't learn a whole lot. I mean, videos are helpful. It depends on how the video instruction's done. But typically, I'm more of a doer when I learn. So I actually have to get in and write the code, make the errors, make the mistakes, and then fix it for it to actually click in my brain. So, I use videos. I've used the Egghead sometimes for some JavaScript stuff. There's good stuff on there for just plain JavaScript. I mix it up.
They have a couple of NativeScript courses also on Egghead. One of them is yours, I believe, right?
That is right. Yeah, that was that's the only big course I ever done. And it was time consuming, and that's why I haven't ever really done any more. Courses can be time consuming if you're not set up and you have the video editing, and if you're not in the groove, it consumes a lot of time. But once you're in the groove, if you knock them out, it takes no time. So, but it took me several days, maybe even a week, to just kind of find a groove with it.
That's it?
Yeah, it took about...
Shit, man, it takes me like months to create courses sometimes.
I probably spent 2 days writing it, and then it probably took me 3 or 4 days to actually figure out the video editing software. And I think we used... I forget the name of it. It is...
ScreenFlow? Camtasia?
It's ScreenFlow, yeah.
ScreenFlow.
So it took me several days to figure out how to cut and splice all the videos together and, cut out the edits. And I was awful at that. So I would go back and just retake the whole video and just try to nail it, and then that way I didn't have to do a whole lot of editing because I sucked at it and it's taking a lot of time. So I did a lot of one take videos on that course that I did.
That's hard to do. I've never been able to do that. Never.
It was probably not very smart to do, but I didn't know.
Well, the more time you practice it, the less editing you have to do later, but then you're investing that time ahead of time. Last question, Brad. What do you do when you're not at your computer? I know you like to work out. Is that what you're primarily doing these days?
That is my main hobby. I've got 3 kids and a wife. So family time is also another big thing that I'm into. That's one reason I don't do a whole lot of after work open source anymore, is because I've prioritized family. And then my weightlifting stuff is also a big priority in my health. So that's why this probably for a year and a half now, maybe 2 years, my open source after hours work has just kind of dropped off. Like I kind of burned out on it for doing it for 2.5, 3 years. I was staying up till midnight, 1 a.m. working on plugins and working on just stuff, and fun, and I learned a lot, but my family and my hobbies are a bigger priority for my overall health, physically, mentally, emotionally. So
yeah, absolutely. I try to hit the gym once in a while. I used to do it like every single day, but the last year or so I've been really slacking, and I have a home gym that I've set up, but I'm in there like maybe twice a week at most. It's not enough. And I always say, to the folks that are listening out there, the developers especially, you're sitting at your computer most of the day. Get out there, take breaks. You don't have to go and hit the gym hard like Brad does. You can just take a walk or something to get you started, something to get your blood flowing. It'll really help you think, actually, and it'll help your development skills too.
It does. I try to get up probably once every hour and a half. I'll get up, and I work from home, so I'll get up and I'll walk for 5-10 minutes if it's just downstairs to cook some food or make a quick snack. And then I'll kind of just stand up and stretch at least every hour or two, because sitting is not good.
Yeah. Do you prefer to work out in the mornings or in the evenings?
I used to be an evening guy, actually, and then I guess it was last summer, so 2019, family schedules got difficult to make that happen. And so I started forcing myself to wake up at 6 a.m., get to the gym by 6:15, and then back to the house by 7:15, 7:30. And it took me about 2 weeks to really get in a groove with that. And then once I did, I've never gone back. I'm always a morning person. I'll wake up at 5:15, try to get to the gym by 5:30, done by 6:30, 6:45. Or if it depends on the kid's schedule also, I'll try to squeeze a workout in maybe at 8 to 9. It just kind of depends.
Yeah.
Definitely a morning person now.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Brad, and sharing your story. And I hope that encourages some of you folks out there to also hit the gym or at least work out a little bit and mix that up. Mix it up.
Yep. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Brad. Nice having you here, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.